How you doing today, friends? Have a great afternoon. This is your friend Michael from Coalition with a Purpose, from Coalición con Propósito, and just reaching out to you, guys, really quick to talk to you about certain news and ideas that happen in the day, right? And ideas that I have for the economy. Today was a very important day. The jobs report with the revisions came out. It was kind of sad to hear because in reality, only healthcare and it was healthcare and social assistance that were the biggest um, winners. Meanwhile, the rest of the economic sectors were pretty much down. Government jobs were on the low, on the negative. And my sector, hospitality, only added 1,000 jobs. So no wonder everything has been so scarce, and no wonder why Americans are suffering so much. Most Americans do not work on the healthcare sector; they work on the other sectors that are not making it. Um, per what I'm reading, also looks like the companies are eating the tariffs, right? And that's the reason why they have been forced to reduce headcount. That way, they don't lose customers and they don't pass these prices to consumers. The stock market was pricing it in. It was going high, really high. And then when they realized, no, this is not good because it means that the economy is not in good shape. Uh, the economy is not doing well, right? Because only healthcare and social assistances were the only ones that were able to pull it out. They started selling off immediately. And then they said, like, my take is that then at the end, they said, like, well, probably the Fed will cut rates. Now there's a probability and more certain than nothing that the Fed will cut rates. I definitely agree with the market. If that's the premise, I definitely agree with them. We believe that the Fed will definitely cut rates this year and that it will be very aggressive, or at least that they should be aggressive because the economy is not doing well. Maybe Danielle DiMartino Booth, who was part of the Fed um, during the time, and during the time of the Great Recession as well, she expects four cuts. I definitely agree with Danielle DiMartino Booth. I believe that as a minimum, they should do at least two, but they should be very aggressive because the American economy right now is needing stimulation, which will need stimulus from the Fed, right, by cutting rates, so the businesses could access capital at more discounted rates, and it needs also stimulation from President Trump and the Congress. Um, or if Democrats take control of the House in November, pending that does not get it to there, though we don't think is going to get that far. But if it gets that far, whoever's controlling the Democrats in the House and Republicans in the Senate and in the White House, whether Democrats or Republicans have full control. Doesn't matter who's controlling. The president and Congress will have to stimulate the economy, and the best way is by doing our plan, which they have already established, which is CARES 2.0, right? Which means stimulate the economy and stimulate the businesses, stimulate the people, right? And stimulate, which by doing that you stimulate the consumers, and our economy is heavily dependent on consumers. Stimulate the consumers, stimulate the people. Give them, I don't want to call them stimulus payments. Let's call them dividend checks. Whether that's from the tariff revenue or from the tariff revenue, from some revenue set apart for that. Give that for the from the people's for give that to the people, right? Because the people need it, and that if that's big of a price tag for strict conservatives, as I propose, let's do quarterly payments of $600 or $800 to the people from their money. Uh, let's give it to them, because this is gonna help the people, because in the long term, because it's gonna help them get by, to do the things that they need, like buy groceries, shopping, to pay liquidate debt, you know, or just shop. It's going to help them because that income is going to be supplementary income next to what they're doing. Which leads me to the second part of the CARES Act 2.0, which is stimulate the businesses from that tariff revenue, right? Or take some of the revenue, right, and give it to the businesses. Stimulate the businesses and tell the business this is for you to deal with the demand and to find ways to raise the wages of the workers, right? By doing this will help businesses because it will raise the wages of the workers, and by doing that, it will be a domino effect. People will consume more. There will be more demand, right? And it will get more stability. And we believe that doing this, it will have inflation under control because if I'm not mistaken, in the past stimulation under the prior administration, it was the stimulus payment, right? But I didn't see much was done to stimulate the business. Not saying that they didn't did it, but I was not too familiar with it. But what I really think is that what happened with that stimulus package is that it was done once and it was not followed through. No, the way we're going to do this is kind of similar to the way that it was being done in CARES Act, where there was a follow up. It was constant. It was frequent. And the idea with this is to have a follow up, keep it constant, keep it frequent for a period of maybe 1 year to 2 years, and I believe that should put the economy back on track. We should also try to see if we can bring the unemployment benefits that we had, and let also assist the states administering that, right? Um, so 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 that way, people that are either having their hours slashed or they're not making enough, they could collect some of that supplementary income. Of course, it has to be controlled based on um, how much the person needs, right? And there has to be certain controls in regards to that. But I believe that it should be also given to the people that are suffering unemployment, right? Kind of have that same benefit, that unemployment benefit that we had in CARES Act, or people that have their hours slashed. I believe that that's key. That's key as well. Uh, we also believe that the president should establish a task force for the economy, and the task force should be making the following question: what's causing the wages to not be up to par with the prices? And the second question will be, how can we get that fixed? And what the task force will do is that the task force will brainstorm on this, and they'll recommend to the president, to the Congress, solutions that are achievable, that could be attained, right? And that could be done, right? But this needs to be done. Who knows? Maybe give the task force some oversight over or responsibility over on the stimulation program, right? That'll be good too. Maybe give each state a seat at the task force. Maybe there's multiple ways of working that out, right? We believe that that is necessary and that is important. Um, so we believe that this is necessary for the economy, and that the American economy is begging for stimulation. This needs to be done quickly and immediately, because based on the numbers that we saw today, where only healthcare was carrying the economy, and my sector, hospitality, only adding 1,000 jobs is something that is not good. This is not a healthy economy. Healthy economy should be an economy where every sector contributes. Yeah, you might have lagging sectors here and there, but not most of the sectors, with one sector carrying the economy. So we believe that the American economy is due for stimulation, and we believe that the market now will join us, because we believe that the market now is heavily bullish that the Fed will have to cut. That the Fed has no choice but to cut. We agree with the markets that the Fed has no choice but to cut. Now, going back to the tariff situation, how I think that this all unraveled and happened, right? I think that, uh, you know, probably the president had internal info, maybe this is my personal opinion, that listen, the debt that the United States has is too big, and there has to be a way of paying this down, or otherwise, in the future, this is going to be a catastrophe, right? And I believe the president saw a way of bringing revenue. Yeah, maybe trying to bring fair trade and all this, but bringing revenue and using that revenue to pay the tariffs. And he said, well, at the end of the day, we will stimulate the economy with this revenue. But the idea is that I don't think the administration kind of outlined very, very elongated and clearly, or better said, on the long term, they did not thought that the effects were going to be so bad and so recessionary. Because remember when President Trump told them to eat the tariffs, business said, we will eat the tariffs. We don't want to pass that to the consumer because we don't want to lose that consumer, because that's going to be devastating. So what they started to do, in my opinion, is they started to reduce the headcount, slash hours, and at the end of the day, what happened is that, of course, by default, American buying power, Americans buying power starts to reduce, starts to decrease, which will put people into a position to be forced to start making cuts, to start avoiding the things that they like to do, which will lead to that, to which leads to less demand, which leads to less hours, which leads at the end, in worst cases of scenarios, with companies and small business filing for bankruptcies. But the reality is this all could be avoided and can be avoided, right? If we stimulate the economy quickly. That's why we're telling President Trump, we're begging President Trump to do it quickly, to the Congress to do it quickly, take care of it quickly. And we believe that the states also could do this. We remember that states like California and others had stimulus packages. We believe that Florida could do this. Florida could definitely, at least in my state, but in states as a whole, they could definitely do this. They could have a task force, right? They could find areas where taxpayer dollars are being wasted, areas where certain things are not necessary. Take that revenue, split it, give some to the people of the state and give some to the businesses, and maybe whatever's left, use it to pay whatever debt is remaining. We believe that these efforts combined will definitely put the economy back on track. We believe that this is still at this time is a quick fix still, but the more that it delays, the more problems it's going to create, and we're going to be in a recession, and probably, unfortunately, it might be worse than the financial crisis. Who knows? So that's my take on that, right? On how can this be fixed and be brought to a resolution, right? Um, I wanted to add certain right analysis, geopolitical analysis on the midterm elections, right? On what every party needs to do or has to do, not only to bring change, but better said, has to do to win, right? Republicans on their end, they have to stimulate the economy. They have no choice. They have to do this. They have to stimulate the economy. They have to get on that, and they have to do it quickly so the people can see that they're delivering and that they're doing this. They have to avoid controversial bills that will not pass in the Senate, and get on the president's Trump's economic agenda, like the credit card rates, for example. They have to find ways to see how they could cap maybe 10, not possible. See what we can get it to 5, right? So that's on the Republican end. On Democrats have to do the same thing. They have to pledge to the same thing, but they also have to build coalitions. They have to reach out to minor parties. They have to reach out to the independents, and build that coalition along with what I'm proposing for the economy, right? And saying that they will deliver that they will bring that when they get to Congress, right? That will reach to people. People will give them voter confidence, right? For minor parties, which I am proud chairman of one, Coalition with a Purpose Party, we believe that the strategy should be pledging, right, to work with the people, have a contract with the people, right? Um, Respond to it directly, work with them directly, try to work with them to get those things they're proposing into law, into policy, integrate them right in the party, right, and build the coalitions with the big parties and with the other parties, right, for the betterment of the states and the communities that where we live in, and with the communities of our state as a whole, in our state, right? In our states, and pledge with the agenda of stimulating the economy, taking care of the economy, and pledging to work towards that and deliver on those promises, on that commitment, on that commitment. And for the independents, we believe, right? We believe that for the independents, which even though they're not a political party, I recognize them as a political party. For the independents, the best way that they have to do all of that we're mentioning, right? But they also have to organize themselves, many of them, as if they were a party, right? And exercise that influence, right, that they have over the national politics and over the big parties. Like, you need our votes. This is what we want. And for this organization, they could have like association of independence, chapters of independence, lead by chair or a leader or something of the similar, and build those as we said, and do what we were recommending for the other parties. We believe that could definitely bolster, independent victories. And at the end of the if we all do this, the one that benefits is the electorate, right? The electorate wins, right? The people are the ones that win because we're gonna be working for them. We're gonna be their employees, and that's what we are. We are their employees. We work for them, right? And the last point of the podcast that I wanted to add is that um, many things have been expected in regards to the Supreme Court decision, in regards to President Trump's tariffs. But we believe that seeing the Supreme Court kicking the can down the road, we believe that the Supreme Court is playing chess right here, playing political chess. And the way they do this by kicking the can down the road, among other things that I'm going to get into right now, uh, they are kind of telling the president that they're equal branch of government, and that they might rule them unconstitutional if they deem so. That way, the president doesn't go ballistic with the tariffs, right? Which leads me to the points that I'm gonna explain now. Like the court, because if the court says, okay, we're gonna believe these are unconstitutional, and then we get into a limbo because the tariffs might have to be paid and all this. It should be it should be an issue. It'll take years for that to be reimbursed. By take months or years for that to be reimbursed back. If they say no, this is constitutional, right? The president might go ballistic, and we already know that these reduced tariffs have caused enough harm, and that is not comparing to the ones that were in Liberation Day, which they were really high. um, so by doing that, the Supreme Court lets the president know that they are a co-equal branch of government, you know. So that way the president kind of it's more careful with the topic of the tariffs. So that's my take on it, and we will continue, talking. We will continue building this friendship that we're building here. And remember, I'm your friend. You can count on me, and we work for you. That's the way it is. Um, keep it up, keep up the good fight, and we're in this together. We're in this together, my people.